Welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christine Marie. Y'all, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. This is actually coming on the heels of something that happened to me this weekend that I'm excited to share with you all. But before we dive on into today's topic regarding how are we spending our energy, I just want to give a quick overview of what this show is. So for those of you who know, we talk about the cultivation of the human being. We are talking about the cultivation of intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and physical intelligence. And it is each one of these that together amalgamate the human being and ultimately also the human experience. I lived for 28 years of my life only really cultivating two of those intelligences. And so as I've brought in the different dimensions, man, life has been so much more holistic and also exciting. There's an element of unpredictability when we're allowing ourselves to be wholly involved in life and not taking control of it anymore, but rather allowing life to unfold. And there's a couple concepts that can support that, but we'll get to that here in a few minutes. Before we dive on in, I am actually going to go on mute and sneeze really fast, and then we'll get started. I didn't even end up sneezing. I just feel the itch coming. So y'all, we're going to dive into today's conversation. This Saturday, I was on my way back from the gym, and I just had this thought come to mind around the energy that I put out. So in every one of these areas, intelligence, intellectually, emotionally, physically, spiritually, we're exerting energy in the cultivation of either one of those. Me being here on the show with you, I am exerting a specific amount of energy to varying degrees. Yesterday morning, I woke up with a load of energy and was really excited to engage with the day, to the point, and this is just like really a sneak peek around about who I am and I guess into who I am. At one point, I literally jumped on the bed. I was having such a wonderful morning and I was excited for the day. And frankly, I want to live life from this place of engaging and viewing life as something to be honored every single day, because we don't know when it's our last. And I've been feeling that so keenly as different folks have been lost in our family over the years, and even just receiving some really sad news about someone else in my family this week. So there's just an ongoing awareness that we don't know how long life is, how many days we get. And so each day, therefore, is to be honored and viewed as precious and never a commodity. So because of that, I now want to engage holistically in the day, but also be incredibly wise about where and how I allocate my energy. There's a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And it talks about effectively you start your day 100%, just like your phone that's been charging overnight. And as you continue throughout the day, the battery pack just starts to dwindle. And with every single use, it drops a little bit further. Same thing goes with our energy. We start with 100%, ideally. We wake up, we feel energized. And then as we move throughout the day, depending on how much exertion, how much cause is needed for our attention and thus our energy and whatever we're participating in, we're going to exert a certain amount of energy. And so by the end of the day, we might end up with 10% left, 30% left, depending on what the day held. And then the question is, are we actually aware of how we are exerting our energy? Do we view our energy as something to be protected, something precious? If we think of it as, man, if I've got a bank and I've got energy in the bank, and every time I exert energy, I'm effectively cashing out. I'm making a withdrawal and actually giving that energy to something else. And thinking of it as that kind of exchange, because here's the thing. That which we actually withdraw from our energy bank and put it somewhere else, are we depositing into the future? Are we depositing into a relationship? Are we depositing into work and thus our future in that way? Or are we actually taking our energy and putting it into something akin to social media? Are we giving it away to a cause that frankly is something that is not actually in alignment with our values? And so this is actually where it's really, really, really important to do an energy audit of where am I expending my time? Where am I expending my energy? And what is the return on that energy deposit? It's again that concept of return and what's the return on the investment that you're putting out. Because for every single withdrawal from your energy bank, you are making a deposit and an investment in all these different areas. So the more we actually think with intentionality around each one of these categories, and there's more categories beyond just intellectual intelligence, emotional, spiritual, and physical. In the physical realm, there's a lot of different activities you could choose. So for each one of these buckets, it like opens a wellspring of plenty of other options. I was my parents, it's their 40th anniversary yesterday, and all of us kids are going in and purchasing different presents for them. And I was looking actually on just like all these different activities we could purchase for them. One of them was dance lessons. Another was what was it? It was like a dinner cruise. So I was looking at all these different gift options, and each one of those is going to be an investment, not just of their time, but literally of energy if it's going to be an activity. Well, my dad, he's been having knee issues. And so now there's a real limitation on him physically for how he actually can execute his energy in that way. But here's the thing that's so interesting and sad. What if we had been taking radical responsibility earlier to be aware of, am I allocating the right amount of energy into my physical bank? Because in so doing, it maintains the health and wellness to then preserve me for a longer ability to then be able to just experience life at a longer, later date. So sometimes we're actually putting deposits into the bank of physical, like the physical aspect, for a return later on. Us doing the working out and us taking care of our physical body now, today, may very well be the thing that prevents us from injury in the future, tomorrow. And so because there was an improper allocation of energy, where a lot of energy was going into maybe even the professional side, but not the physical side, now there's an improper balance. There's an overemphasis on the professional. But here's the thing, if you're not physically well, what's the point of having indexed so much on the professional? Y'all, this is where, when I'm getting in these rooms and having these conversations with entrepreneurs who are far advanced than I am, they're incredibly successful. They're the ones who are emphasizing it is so important to take care of your physical health. It is so important to pay attention to your working out, and not working out for the purpose of looking a certain way. It's for the purpose of even just longevity. It's for the purpose of being able to live the fullness of the life that you possibly can. And it's also preparing the foundation for the future. Someone asked me the other day how old I was, and I was like, well, I'm 32. And he was like, well, you've got until 35. Like after 35, that is when basically everything you've been doing today, you're now building on that. And obviously there's layers and categories to that, but it really caught my attention because it's really true in so many ways. What are the habits I'm developing today that then set the foundation that is effectively the house upon which I will then build? What are the physical habits that I'll welcome, hopefully, children into, where I'm like, hey, come and join mommy as we do today's walk or workout or exercise? What is the spiritual foundation that, again, you welcome your kids into, or even welcome other people into your home? What does that aspect look like around the dinner table? What are the topics that you carry? What are the conversations that you hold? So every single investment we make, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, physically, we will yield a return. And so we were talking about this the other day around what is our ideal in each category. What's our ideal physically? What's our ideal emotionally, spiritually, mentally? And without clarity of that, we're not going to be able to make the right kind of investments because we don't actually know what we're aiming towards. So before I continue, I'm just going to go ahead and jump here in the chat with my dear friends. And then we'll continue our conversation. Yay, here we are. All right. Gigi Young, hello. I'm glad to see you. Case of Mondays. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling that. Man in the Hat says, my energy goes into improving myself for my responsibilities at work and into improving my eye racing skills. Nice. I love that. Jingle Jungle says, my energy goes into sleeping and eating most of the time. DJ, energy is meant to be spent. What you decide that energy is on, or what you decide to spend that energy on, is completely and entirely dependent on the individual. Work just drains me. Some days I don't even want to race. I just want to do nothing. I feel physically exhausted every day. Man in the Hat, a quick question in that regard, do you feel like what you're doing for work is right? Like, do you feel, not that you have to have some big grand calling per se, but does that feel like you're like, no, that's where I'm supposed to be? I'm doing what I'm supposed to do every day. And even though you're physically exhausted, is there a sense of, I guess, peace knowing that you're where you're supposed to be? Because being where we're supposed to be doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean that it's going to make it any better, but it does bring a semblance of peace knowing we are where we're supposed to be. Oak Tree, good morning. True. He says, I'm watching you, and that is social media. It's so true. So I'm actually glad you said that, because when I say social media, the way that I view it is kind of like the doom scrolling, where it's not intentional. Here's the thing. Anything that is not done with intentionality, that's done on default, I think warrants a look at. Sometimes just driving home. Yesterday or 3 days ago, I was driving home on Friday afternoon, and I just had this moment where I just was like, oh, I'm literally driving in my condominium and look at the sun setting. And I woke up for that 1 second, because so much of the time we are on autopilot. That doesn't mean we're doing something bad. Obviously, I was driving home. That was a good thing to go home. Yet in that moment, it was an opportunity to further awaken and further realize, oh my gosh, what a blessing it is to live here. Like, literally, that was my moment when I realized, oh yeah, I'm driving home right now. What a blessing that I have a home. What a blessing that I'm in this neighborhood. What a blessing watching the sunset. It was such a beautiful day, and the weather was gorgeous. So there's something around just being conscious and intentional about how we're living. One of my goals is to go through as few days as possible asleep, and to live as many days as possible awake, to just be aware and to be intentional with the conversations, with the words coming out of our mouths, with the way that we expend energy. It's interesting, to that point about expending energy and being mindful of that. There are some people that maybe we actually shouldn't spend energy on or with. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people. What it might mean, though, is that there's not, when we're talking about return on investment, if we're investing continuously in somebody that just kind of continues to kind of poo-poo us, that warrants a look at the relationship of, is this a worthy expenditure of my time and energy? If my energy is something that is finite, that's sacred, like truly sacred, because if I believe that I am made for a purpose, there's a reason for my life, then me investing in something with someone that is not yielding any results, perhaps even they're yielding negative results, it warrants a look in the mirror to say, am I on the right track here? Am I investing in the right places? So the goal with this conversation isn't just, oh, don't be on social media. Oh, don't go spend time with people who don't like you. But really, it's an intentional awareness of how we're spending our time, how we're allocating it, and what is the return. Because to your point, hopefully, when we spend time together on this show, we're yielding. My goal is that we yield 10x for every time we put in, that we're yielding great returns. And honestly, for the times that we don't, I think that warrants a question. Is this still a good use of your time and mine? And I hope so. And that's my job, is to ensure that I'm continuing to bring in guests that are meaningful and cause us to question and to look in the mirror, to make sure that I'm good, that I'm investing in myself so that I have something to give. But when it starts erring on the side where it's like, not really getting anything. And sometimes, we really do engage in an environment or with people simply just to give and not to receive. But more often than not, that which we give, there is a return on that. Rarely do we not get some kind of return on the investment we make. And so it's really just an analyzation of what are the returns for your investment. Just jumping back here in the chat. Exocho, hello. Gigi says, not entirely dependent on the individual if you have responsibilities like family, work. So good. David I, good morning or good afternoon. Richard, hello. Your mind is more powerful. Don't let anyone tell you what you are. So good. Kevin Cowie, good afternoon. Inco, hello. Jamia, hello. I'm so glad to see you. The man in the hat says, yes, where I am at is the door the Lord opened for me, or God opened for me. I worked and waited patiently for him to lead my way here, and here I am. Oh, I love that. I think that there's a part of energy that we have to invest on things we don't really want to do just to build our foundation for a better future. Yeah. I'm so glad that you said that. I mean, gosh, it's not about us doing, wow. All right, well, let's go here. So when we have this moment, for those of you who, and honestly, it sounds like many of you are not where I was. Where I first started my journey of knowing, I felt like I was completely asleep. Like I had no sense of identity really outside of, well, who does God tell me who I am? But it was like head knowledge, not heart knowledge. It was very, very disconnected because I was very disconnected from myself. So as I came to kind of wake up and be like, oh, who did God actually make me to be personally? Like as an individual, not just, oh, God loves everybody. It's like more personally for me. The more that I realized that, I actually came to realize how important it is to consider, what do I want? Because so often in the desires of our hearts actually lie the dreams that are very unique to you and me for us to go and fulfill on, that are like part of what God gave us as kids, of like, oh, dreaming big things and wishing big wishes and wanting a beautiful future for ourselves, for our kids, for even like creation, thinking of actually the thing that separates us from AI is the ability to have an imagination. So there's this aspect when we're children where we can dream big, where we imagine things and our minds are racing with creation. And as we get older, we kind of move away from the childlike ways in so many instances. And so as I started coming to know who I am, I started to return to some of those childlike elements where I was like, what do I love? What do I want? What do I care about? What are those dreams? And in the reclamation of those aspects, I really came to kind of recover the parts of me that had kind of died along the way, when we're constantly kind of beaten down on an emotional level. Parts of us die. And so I think it's a really beautiful and wonderful thing to recover those parts that have died along the way. And then after we do that, then there's this very, we've talked about this before on the show, the importance of and, the conjunction that allows for two seemingly opposing truths to coexist, the ability for me to really not want to do something, but to do it because I know it's the right thing. Well, acknowledging both parts is really important, because if we were to just suppress what we want and ignore it and try to kill that part of us that makes us human, and just try to do what we're supposed to do out of habit or just out of honor, we might very well kill the part of us that actually is just as important as the other part. It's kind of like the left brain and the right brain. The left brain, in so many ways, it is the systems and organization. And I would even say, just from kind of simplification of this concept, the honor part, like we're just going to do it. We're going to power through. Whereas the right hemisphere of the brain is more so the nurturing and the caring. And there are times where you actually, out of necessity, need to silence and quiet the right hemisphere of the brain because it's actually going to immobilize you. But for so long as that goes unanswered, silent for too long, we can very well shut off the part of us that makes us human, that makes us the unique individual that God made us, rather than just kind of operating as we, and I say this in air quotes, as we should. But there's that fine balance of what do I feel, what do I want, and what is right, and allowing for those to operate in tandem with each other, the juxtaposition of the seemingly opposites to walk hand in hand down the road and on the pathway to who do I want to be at the end of my life? Well, I want to do that which is honorable and that which is right. And I also want to experience the holistic aspects of emotion, because emotion is so much of what makes us human. So how do we allow for those two to work in concert? And I think it's really important that we actually allow for both to have a voice. And then at the end of the day, you and I are the ones that make the decision. It's not either one of those. Because here's the thing about internal family systems. This is a therapeutic practice that was created based off of thousands of patient records, conversations, data. And they created this process based on four parts of what makes a human being. The part of us that's wounded. And just really fast, I'm just going to go ahead and jump here in the chat. I just want to quickly check in and make sure that everyone is being kind and gracious. Let me just see. Persian Virgin, I'm just wanted to call you out and just make sure that you're being kind here. So just wanted to say that. I saw your comment. So just letting you know, we will put folks on timeout or just hide you from the channel if we're not adhering to kind of the first principles of doing unto others as we would have them do unto us. So with that, we'll continue. Y'all, it's really a beautiful thing when we can allow ourselves to feel. Because in feeling, that really is, there's a point of connection with others. There's a point of connection even with ourselves in allowing for us to know the pain and also the joy. And I found that for so deep as I will go in allowing myself to feel the pain, I will equally, and honestly, usually in equal measure, experience joy. And I felt this so keenly when my brother-in-law was killed and then my sister had her 3-week-old baby. It was literally within the same moment where it was meeting my baby niece, Alyssa Rose, for the first time and hugging my sister after her husband was killed. It's like, never have you felt such conflicting, and not never, for me, never had I experienced such conflicting emotions, just the pain of grief and that heightened joy. And I actually think in that allowing of the emotion, it's to man in the hat, like you said, you can't really live until you've died a little. There's the death and the new life, the death and the new life. And so if we're allowing both to work in concert together, then there's a holistic, experiential type of living. One of my favorite lines from a song says, I want to live this one wild life. I want to rip it apart. To allow for the emotion to be felt, to be experienced, can be the very thing that allows us to live fully. And so in the emotion lies courage, to allow ourselves to feel the weight of maybe what was lost, but also what was gained, and allowing ourselves even to feel proud of ourselves in so many ways. Just scrolling back up in the chat with you guys. This life is a gamble. Better invest in yourself. Simone Hall, Reach for Happiness. Jay, Mia, superb conversation. Thank you. Oh, thank you, my friend. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so grateful for each one of you. Jose from Slovakia, hello. I'm so glad you're here. Greg, I'm so glad you're here. I just scrolled in. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm so glad you joined. This life is temporary. Better to invest in God. Maybe invest in both, or maybe all three. Invest in ourselves and God and in others. I love that. And you know what, y'all? This is where I'm going to wait to get to that. My falling star, hello. Thank you for joining, Jose. I'm doing really well. I'm glad we're all here today. And this is such an important conversation where we expend our energy, where are we expending our time and attention and energy? Oftentimes the return on investment is not there because you give your energy to others or a cause for the greater good, even when you get nothing in return, and that's okay sometimes. DJ, I'm so grateful, as always, you bringing the balance there. I think you're absolutely right. I think, what's interesting, could it be that the return is in the fact of duty? I'm thinking about, you tell me if would the sense of honor and the sense of duty and just fulfilling on your not just obligation, but fulfilling on the role of what you signed up for, even though you might not get the thanks or the accolades, is like the inner pride. Is that return? Isn't that interesting? So maybe we invest in a cause, but the return isn't from the cause itself or even the person that we gave to, but rather internally we get a return because we did the right thing. And here's the thing. There's this biblical concept of what we give in secret. Our Father knows. God, our Father, knows and sees, and then He rewards us. So isn't that an interesting angle here? This is a whole other dimension that we might give intellectually, or we might make an investment intellectually and an investment emotionally, but then gain and get the return spiritually. Or maybe even it's the complete opposite. We actually make an investment spiritually, and then we get the gain in return emotionally. That's so interesting. And y'all, that's such a cool thing. It's so never linear. This is the importance of and. It's like there's so many different ways of looking at this. And this is why we need each other. I'm just so grateful, DJ, for you saying that, because I completely agree. That's a whole other aspect of, we actually might give and make a deposit, make an investment in one category, and then receive in a completely other. And so this is where living with intention and awareness allows for us to know, oh man, I'm actually going to make an investment intellectually, but I know my yield will be coming elsewhere. And that's great. And it can even be financial. Maybe your career is investing emotionally, but financially you're making a return in that regard, where emotionally you're depleted at the end of the day, but you're making financial return because it's your job, and maybe you're even getting the spiritual return as well, of like the fulfillment that comes from doing what you're called to do, even though you're maybe emotionally drained afterwards, maybe even intellectually drained as well. So it just adds a whole bunch more dynamic, which I'm so glad that you dimension rather than dynamic. So thank you, DJ. Freak Out, hello. Yato, hello. J Prime, we are live. I'm just looking here in the chat. 363 English, good to see you. Postseason, Eli, hello. Feeling it's a double-edged sword, but I agree. Being numb is not the answer, although that is still my default setting. DJ, has anything changed in the last month or so? I know we've talked about different angles of emotion and what does it mean to feel and all that. So I'm just wondering if there's been any change, or if you're like, I still don't want to feel. Richard, I will say, Richard, I know that I don't know, maybe I have seen your name here a couple of times before, but just so you know, DJ actually is one of the very few who will blame others. I feel like DJ does a beautiful job assuming responsibility. So just want to put that out there. I don't know what was said before, but just saying. Gerard, hello. Rising to shine, hello. Thank you, Jamia. Thank you, my friend. I'm glad you're here. There's no such thing as altruism. Word. I really hate that. I really hate that. And it is, I mean, it's kind of an interesting concept. It's tough to accept that you're responsible for your past, current, and future reality. Richard, I'd be curious, at what point do you think, and actually this is a question for everybody, at what point do we become responsible for the past? Like at what age? That's actually a really, really interesting question. And I'm very curious to hear what you all have to say. At what point do we become responsible truly for our lives? Is it 7 years old, 12, 3, 18? Like at what point do we become responsible for what was our experience in childhood and our experience in adolescence and young adulthood? At what point do we become responsible? And I've never thought of this. This is, I think my answer, but I want to hear from you guys first. Just scrolling up in the chat. Joshua, hello. Francis, hello. Alex, hello. Good to see you. Yasir, Bonjaz, hello. Polish Walk, hello. I do not have a good answer for you. I'm sorry. You can ask the other guys here. I'm sure that they'd have good answers. Rising to shine, change is MJ's Man in the Mirror. Oh, good song. 1000 Day Radio, hello. I'm glad you're back. Good to see you. And Ambush, hello. Think Tank, hello. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for subscribing. Yay. DJ. Oh my gosh. All right, here we go. So the question that I asked was, at what point are you responsible for your life? At what point, are you actually responsible for your past and what your environment was growing up and then your present and obviously your future? So that was my question. Rising to Shine says, age is a number, conscious is life. Richard says, when you're conscious. Mega Scar Stand, hello, says, depends on what you're blaming yourself for. Everyone is different and unique, meaning age doesn't mean a thing. It's different depending on the individual and the life they have been through. DJ says, I agree. 1000 Day Radio, you will one way or another wear the marks of your choices is my guess. Maybe it depends. 18 is a good age to take full responsibility, I guess. We should be responsible in our childhood. Sometimes it depends on our parents. Y'all, it's so interesting. Here's what's curious to me. When you're conscious, I feel like I did not wake up until I was 28 years old. And I made choices and I needed to live with them. So at what point are we making conscious choices versus still making choices? When I was little, and my darling and I have talked about this, and I actually don't want to go down this path, but I'll bring it up as an example, disciplining children, because the children are making choices. Even if I knew what I was doing when I was a kid when I disobeyed my parents, right? I was making a conscious choice. But then perhaps it's then looking at the layers and levels of consciousness. And to what you were saying earlier about it depends on our parents, Alex says that. And then also Man in the Hat, what you've been through. So There's, if you have been through abuse as a really, really, really young kid, your brain neurologically is wiring at that age, and then it can even freeze and pause its process and connective pathways at that point of trauma. And then there's also an aspect of, okay, well, if you knew that you would be physically abused for not acting a certain way, well, you're making a choice, but it's also very much so out of fear. So there's so much here. I think that because there's just so much nuance to this question, I think it actually really warrants us to look at the past with so much compassion. Because for so many of us, we were acting so much out of reaction rather than a proactive intention. That's why we started out this entire conversation with living awake, living with intention. Because without that semblance of being really aware and being really awake of what we're doing and what we're proactively choosing, we're simply just living in reactivity, kind of on our heels, in defensiveness, usually acting out of fear, rather than switching and kind of moving into the driver's seat of our life and really recognizing, man, I get to take control of this beautiful journey and this beautiful life that of the breath that's been breathed into my lungs. And that is a gift, and that warrants a great deal of compassion to analyze the past. But for in so many ways, I think, yes, it's okay, look at how my life today is a reaction of the past, but really our responsibility is right here, right now. And I think that maybe that actually allows for us to, we talked about and earlier, considering the past, considering Megascar Stan says childhood trauma should be addressed in therapy, like knowing what has happened and being aware of that, but also recognizing, okay, that's how it shows up today, and today I get to choose. Today I get to choose my response. That's a stimulus still in my nervous system. The past is a stimulus until we ever address it. So when somebody does something today, our reaction is not to them because of them. So often it's because of the past. So Viktor Frankl, who authored Man's Search for Meaning, says between stimulus and response is choice. Well, how much of our choice is actually based in the present moment, the current reality of what is, like the hard and fast physical reality of right now versus a stimulus response tied to the past. This is why it is so important to work through what we have been through, regardless of whose fault it is. And I think that does, this question of you got to take responsibility. Yes. But for me, I think it's so important that we take responsibility for how we choose to respond now. A lot of times there wasn't much real consciousness when we were children, when a lot of these scars were built and a lot of these stories were kind of like carved. The stories we tell now, in so many ways, we didn't have much control over the author's pen back then, but now we do. So with that, I am just going to jump here in the chat. Ayub, Morocco. Oh, I love that. I would love to go to Morocco. When you are conscious of being, you're responsible. Yes, I'll say 18 to 20. Yeah. DJ says you have to actually figure out what people mean when they say consciousness. See Mushin, good to see you. Alex Allgood, hello. Aragorn, I love your title. But you don't want to go down the path, but you're going there little. I don't really know. I think I know what you mean, but I'm not certain. Space Invader, hello. Gigi, at the age is when a person tends to really wake up at that age. Jack, yes, I have a darling. See Mush. And the thing is, how much is it about me and how much about we? Ooh, I love that. Some get there early, others get it late in life, and another never gets it at all. It's so true, rising sun. I think and isn't that such an interesting aspect? Like, I do actually think, I think some people don't actually really wake up and like, even as I say that, I'm just reminded of this play I was in when I was in high school. It was my senior year, and we did the play Our Town. And this girl, Emily, it follows her transition from kind of like girlhood into womanhood. And it falls in love with like her high school sweetheart, and they end up getting married, and it's very precious. And then she gets pregnant, and she ends up dying in childbirth. And there's this scene, and it's actually like, I kind of am getting queasy in my stomach thinking about it. There's this scene where Emily, she's literally like dying. And she has this moment where she's taken back to childhood. And she's, a girl. She's sitting at the dining room table with her mother and her siblings, and everyone is bustling around, eating their food. No one's really talking. No one's connecting. Everyone's just kind of doing their own thing. And her mother's moving back and forth, back and forth. And so Emily there, no one sees her. It's kind of like in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey gets the opportunity to see what his life is like without him ever having really lived. And so in this case, she's coming there and no one knows she's there really. And so there's this part where everyone's moving around quickly, and she looks at her mother and she's trying to make eye contact, and she's like, look at me, like look me in the eyes, look. And when I think of this concept of living awake, it's that. It's all of a sudden seeing, truly, truly seeing. It's looking at this table and just like, wow, I'm actually sitting here at a table, and I see these plants over here, and look at the clouds outside, and the wind in the palm tree, and then all of a sudden I tune into the AC unit that I wasn't really paying attention to before. And then I just, pay attention to my hands, and, all of a sudden we're really, really present with this moment. Yet simultaneously, y'all, it's the and I am so aware that this physical reality, this fleshly body of mine, is not actually me. I'm so aware that there's so much more than this present moment. And so to live for right here, right now, actually is not the point whatsoever. So when we're thinking about this, when we're thinking about allocation of energy, when we're talking about living awake, it is, how am I expending my resources of energy, of time, of money, of attention into these categories? For what purpose? And this is where, man, it is so critical that we really ask this question of, why am I here? Why do I exist? What is the point? What is my purpose? And, I was actually praying this morning. My darling was sick, and he just, had his head in my lap, and I was just praying for us. And I just had this moment where I was like, God, I pray that, we know what our future purpose is, but in the meantime, while we're not sure what it is, we can still live really, really well now. We still know what we're supposed to do in so many ways. This whole concept of like knowing what our purpose is can actually be the very thing that prevents us from walking in it and maybe even finding it, because we're like debilitated. So that's the duality of having this present experiential life while also stepping outside of even time and looking at the world through God's eyes and seeing, okay, like, man, there's so much more to live for than just this present moment. Just jumping back here in the chat. Conscious is life. Unconsciousness is this little slice of death. Oh, golly. What was it? Christopher Adams said this quote: so many people die at 25 and are not buried until they're 75. Word. Flower Power says, ask God to surround yourself with good people. C. Mushin says, truth and practicing truth is worlds apart. Isn't that the truth? Man. All right, y'all. Thank you for such a wonderful conversation. This was so good. We will be back on tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll be going through, what is it, lesson, I think 118 from A Course in Miracles. So golly, I guess we're not all the way halfway through the year, but I feel like it's closing in on us. But we're well into Q2. So I hope honestly that we're all living lives that we're proud of at this point, that we're proud of how our year is going, and we're living awake and aware and conscious and all the things. So with that, let me just jump back here in the chat one last time. This has been an interesting chat. DJ, I hope you're okay. Man in the Hat, I hope you're okay. I love you guys. Y'all have been here for many months, so I just want you all to know that I love you. Thank you all so much for joining today. Y'all, it is really important that as we're engaging with each other, we are going to be having the community here pretty soon. And for those of you who have been long timers, I'm so grateful for you. And Man in the Hat, I know that I already talked to you about this, but I'd love for those of you who have been involved with the show for the last few months if you guys would like to be founding members of the Knowing community, I would be so honored to have you, and just would really love to build this with you. So let me know if you guys are interested. Send me an email, me at Christene Marie. I'm going to be kind of starting this off in the next couple of weeks. So I got thrown off after being out of town for a couple of weeks, and so everything kind of got pushed back. But I am trusting we're right on schedule. So with that, thank you all so much for joining. I will see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, and I hope you have a wonderful evening until then.